You paid for me. Now finish it. The words sounded calm, almost practiced, but the look in her eyes promised something far darker. Stay with this story till the end, because what he discovers next will break everything you think you understand about guilt and truth. And if stories that hit your heart and mind matter to you, like the video and subscribe now, because this channel is where such stories live. The room smelled of rain and old wood, the kind of place where secrets felt heavier than air. Daniel stood frozen, wallet still open in his hand, the receipt half crumpled like proof of a mistake he couldn't undo. He had come here angry, humiliated, convinced that money could end what words had failed to fix. The woman sat on the edge of the bed, back straight, hands folded in her lap, her voice steady as if she were reading lines she'd rehearsed 1,000 times. Her name, she had said, was Mara. He hadn't asked if it was real. He hadn't cared. Or at least, he told himself that. Outside, thunder rolled low and distant, as if the sky itself was waiting for something terrible to happen. Daniel swallowed hard, his pulse thudding in his ears. That's not, he started, but she cut him off with a small shake of her head. You didn't pay to talk, she said softly. The words stung more than he expected. This was supposed to be simple, transactional, clean. He had told himself this was how men like him escaped their mistakes, by turning them into numbers, into receipts, into things that could be folded and forgotten. He took a step closer, then stopped. Something felt wrong. Not fear. He knew fear. This was heavier, like standing on a floor that might give way. Mara's gaze flicked downward, just for a second, toward the carpet near the bed, then back up to his face. If you're going to do it, she said, do it now. Her calm unsettled him. People didn't sound like that when they were afraid. He noticed details he'd ignored before. The faint bruise at her wrist, the way she breathed shallowly, the tension in her shoulders like she was bracing for impact. His anger wavered, replaced by something close to shame. You don't have to say it like that, he muttered. She almost smiled. Say it like what? The question hung between them. Daniel's mind flashed back to the argument that had brought him here, the accusation, the slammed door, the words he wished he could drag back into his mouth. He clenched his fists. I paid, he said, trying to sound firm. That's what you wanted, right? Mara leaned back slightly, the mattress dipping under her weight. I want a lot of things, she replied. Money was just the one you could give. Another rumble of thunder shook the window. Daniel's eyes drifted again, unbidden, to the floor. The carpet was old, patterned, but one corner near the bed looked disturbed, as if it had been lifted and laid back down too many times. What's under there? He asked, surprising himself. Mara followed his gaze. For the first time, her composure cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but enough. Nothing that concerns you, she said too quickly. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his spine. He knelt, fingers brushing the carpet before she could stop him. Daniel, don't, she warned, her voice no longer calm. He pulled the edge back. What he saw beneath didn't make sense at first. Dark stains on unfinished wood, scratches like fingernails had dragged across it, and something else, something wrapped in plastic, taped tight, hidden poorly. His stomach dropped. What is this? He whispered. Mara stood abruptly, chair scraping. You wanted it finished, she said, voice trembling now. So look at what you paid to ignore. The room seemed to tilt as Daniel reached out, his hands shaking, dread blooming in his chest. Whatever lay beneath that floor wasn't just a secret. It was a reckoning. And in that moment, he understood the money hadn't bought him an ending. It had bought him the beginning of something that would shatter him completely. Daniel's fingers hovered over the plastic-wrapped shape as if the air itself might bite him. His heart hammered so hard it felt visible, like a thing trying to escape his chest. Mara, he said, voice hoarse, tell me this isn't what I think it is. She didn't answer right away. She stepped closer, bare feet silent on the carpet, and for a moment he thought she might stop him. Instead, she knelt beside him and placed her hand over his, pressing it down. You already know, she whispered. The tape came away with a soft, tearing sound that felt obscenely loud in the small room. Daniel gagged, the metallic smell hitting him before his eyes, could fully register what he was seeing. It wasn't a body, not all of one, but it was enough. Enough to turn his legs weak, enough to make the room spin. He scrambled back, knocking into the bed, breath coming in short, panicked bursts. "This is insane," he said. "This is a setup." Mara's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. "It's a mirror," she replied. "For both of us." He stared at her, mind racing. "You expect me to believe," she cut him off. "Do you remember the girl from the highway?" The words hit like a punch. Daniel's mouth went dry. He remembered the rain, the skid, the scream that hadn't sounded human. He remembered driving away because stopping felt like an admission he couldn't afford. "I didn't," he began. "You didn't look," Mara finished. She stood and pulled a folded photograph from a nightstand drawer, handing it to him. His hands shook as he took it. The face in the photo was younger, smiling, familiar in a way that made his stomach drop. "My sister," Mara said. "She disappeared the night you kept driving." Daniel's vision blurred. The room seemed to close in, walls breathing. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You didn't want to," she replied. The truth pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating. He had paid to forget, paid to be finished. And beneath the floor, beneath the lies, was the cost he'd never settled. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance, growing louder, closer. Mara stepped back, giving him space. "You asked me to finish it," she said. "So I did." Daniel sank to the floor, shattered by the weight of what lay beneath, and the knowledge that there would be no receipt for this reckoning. The sirens did not rush anymore. They slowed, almost respectfully, as if even the sound understood it was arriving at a grave. Daniel remained on the floor, back pressed against the bed, eyes locked on the exposed boards beneath the torn carpet. The plastic-wrapped evidence lay there like an accusation that didn't need words. Every breath felt borrowed. Mara stood near the window, arms folded tight around herself, watching the red and blue lights smear across the glass like bleeding paint. For years, Daniel had mastered the art of distance. Distance from consequences, from guilt, from anything that threatened the careful architecture of his life. Tonight, there was nowhere left to stand that wasn't inside the truth. "You planned this," Daniel said finally. His voice was low, brittle. It wasn't anger anymore. It was awe, mixed with terror. Mara didn't turn around. "I planned to survive," she replied. "This was the only way I knew how." The words landed heavier than any accusation. Daniel pushed himself up, legs shaking, and took a step toward the window before stopping short, as if an invisible line barred him from crossing the room. "You could have ruined me," he said. "Years ago." Mara let out a slow breath. "You ruined yourself the night you didn't stop. I just waited for you to notice." The knock came again, stronger now. "Police," a voice called. Daniel's heart lurched. Instinct screamed at him to run, to find an exit, to bargain. That instinct had kept him alive, successful, admired. But it had also led him here. He didn't move. Mara walked to the door and opened it herself. The officer's eyes took in the room quickly, professionally, the torn carpet, the exposed floor, the look on Daniel's face. One of them swallowed. "Ma'am," he said gently. "Are you safe?" Mara nodded. "I am now." Questions followed, measured and careful. Daniel heard his name spoken aloud, felt it detach from him, become something public. When they asked him to sit, he did. When they asked him to tell them what happened, words stuck in his throat like thorns. He glanced at Mara, searching her face for something, permission, maybe, or mercy. She gave neither. She simply watched. And so he began. He spoke of the highway first, because it was the beginning of everything. The rain had been relentless, blurring the road into silver ribbons. He had been late, furious at a meeting that had gone wrong, at a call he wished he'd never taken. He talked about the impact, how soft it felt, how wrong that softness had been. He talked about slowing, about seeing a shape in the mirror, about the moment he decided not to turn back. As he spoke, the room seemed to tighten around him, every word pulling another brick from the wall he'd built inside himself. An officer asked why he hadn't reported it. Daniel laughed, a sound devoid of humor. "Because I didn't want to be the kind of man who ruins his own life," he said. The officer wrote something down. Mara flinched, not at the words, but at the honesty. Daniel's confession spilled onward. Years of rationalization, of donations made to quiet charities, of sleepless nights soothed by promotions and praise. He admitted to telling himself that if the world hadn't punished him, then maybe it hadn't been that bad. Maybe she'd lived. Maybe someone else had stopped. Mara closed her eyes at that. She waited, she said, voice breaking for the first time. She waited for you. Silence swallowed the room. Daniel bowed his head. There was nothing left to defend. They photographed the floor. They called forensics. The plastic-wrapped remains were treated with reverence, lifted carefully, as if the room itself demanded respect. Daniel watched it all with a strange calm settling over him. A calm born not of peace, but of surrender. When the cuffs came out, he didn't resist. Cold metal closed around his wrists, anchoring him to the moment. As they led him toward the door, he stopped. "Mara," he said. She met his eyes. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "But I need you to know, I see her now." Tears slipped free, unguarded. Mara nodded once. "That's all I ever wanted," she said. "For you to look." Outside, rain soaked Daniel through in seconds, plastering his hair to his forehead, darkening his expensive suit until it looked ordinary, small. Neighbors watched from doorways. Phones glowed. A life dismantled itself in public. As the car door closed, Daniel leaned his head back and let the rain blur the world. For the first time in years, he wasn't running. He was being carried forward by consequences he'd finally earned. Inside the room, the lights dimmed as officers finished their work. The carpet lay folded back, the scar on the floor exposed. Mara sank onto the bed, exhaustion crashing over her. She pressed her palms to her eyes and breathed until the shaking slowed. This was not victory. It was release. She thought of her sister's laugh, the way she hummed when nervous, the plans she'd never get to finish. "I didn't forget you," Mara whispered into the quiet. "I just needed him to remember." When the last officer left, dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. Mara stood and opened the window, letting fresh air wash the room clean. Somewhere beyond the street, life was starting again. Cars moving, doors opening, people unaware that a long-hidden truth had finally surfaced. She closed the window and picked up the torn carpet, folding it neatly. The room would be repaired. The floor would be sealed. But the story would not be buried again. And as the sun rose, Mara understood something she hadn't allowed herself to believe before. Justice didn't erase pain, but it did change its shape. It turned a wound into a line you could trace. A reminder that even the deepest silence can be broken if someone is brave enough to force the truth into the light. Morning arrived without ceremony. No dramatic sky, no sudden peace, just light spilling into corners that had been dark for too long. Mara stood alone in the room, listening to the ordinary sounds of city waking up, a bus sighing at the corner, a dog barking, footsteps on wet pavement. It felt strange how normal everything sounded after a night that had cracked her life open. She packed slowly, folding clothes she barely remembered buying, pausing when her hands trembled. The bed was stripped now, the carpet rolled and gone, the floor sealed by the promise of evidence and time. Nothing looked the same, yet everything was quieter. At the station, the questions continued. Dates, times, names. Mara answered them all, voice steady, even when her chest tightened. She signed statements, corrected spellings, nodded when they thanked her for coming forward. No one said brave. No one said revenge. They said necessary. That word felt right. When she stepped back outside, the sun had climbed higher, warming the chill from her skin. She checked her phone. Messages from unknown numbers, from old friends who had seen the news, from people who recognized her sister's name. Some were apologies. Some were confessions of their own silence. She didn't answer yet. Healing, she knew, required space. Across town, Daniel sat in a small room, painted a color meant to calm. It didn't work. He replayed the night on the highway until the details blurred, then sharpened again. For years, he had measured his worth by outcomes. Wins, profits, reputation. Now the only outcome that mattered had already happened. He signed where they told him to sign. He told the truth again when they asked him to repeat it. There was no relief in it, only a strange, grounding weight. He thought of the receipt he'd crumpled and thrown away, and understood how foolish it had been to believe an ending could be purchased. Weeks passed. The case moved forward, slow and deliberate. Mara returned to her work, different now, less hurried, more present. She visited her sister's favorite places and let herself cry when she needed to. On one quiet afternoon, she stood by the roadside where it had all begun. Cars rushed past, indifferent. She placed flowers on the shoulder and closed her eyes. "I didn't let it go," she said softly. "I carried it until it could stand on its own." The wind moved through the grass, and for the first time, she felt something like peace. Not happiness, not closure, but a steadiness she could trust. The story rippled outward. People talked about responsibility, about the choices made in moments no one thinks are being watched. Some changed, some didn't, but the silence was broken, and that mattered. Mara knew the road ahead would still have nights that hurt. Justice didn't rewrite the past. It simply refused to let it hide. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that truth always surfaces, no matter how deep it's buried, take a moment now to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this deserve to be told, and your support helps keep them alive.